Somewhere beyond the recesses of time and space, two podcasters are set adrift in a machine, picking up transmissions of movies that are forgotten but not gone.
Welcome to Movie Memory Machine, the only podcast about forgotten movies that substitutes vegetarian-friendly options for snips and snails and puppy dog tails. I am your host, Landon Solano, joined always by my co-host, Truman Caps. Truman, it's good to see you.
Landon, it's delicious to be seen. I think that I think the puppy dog tail might be the most tender part of the puppy dog. I mean, you listen, we in the Western world might turn up our noses at it, but that's peasant food, and it's actually, if you can get past your preconceived notions of puppy dogs, it can actually be pretty good.
I don't know, it's all bone.
I mean, yeah, it's bone, but it's like you're not eating the bone. You're just getting the flesh from around the edge, you know. It's like there's not a lot there, but what it is, it's like filet mignon. It's really good.
It's a delicacy. Interesting, okay.
I'm more put off by the snails and also the snips. I don't even know what a snip is.
And yet snails are, a kind of accepted form of food.
Yeah, for the French. If we want to take our cues from them, sure.
Well, let's escargot into today's film.
It's going to be a good episode, guys. We are cooking already.
Today, the machine made us watch Gretel and Hansel from 2020.
Ooh.
Truman, can you crack open the spell book and give us the ingredients of this story?
I abracadab can. No, I'm going to edit that out.
Abracandabra.
Oh, God damn it. In a bleak and cursed fairy tale world, 16-year-old Gretel, played by Sophia Lillis, and her younger brother Hansel, played by Sam Leakey, are thrown out of the house by their insane, newly widowed mother. Gretel does her best to care for Hansel as they make their way through the cruel and frightening world in search of employment. The pair get lost in the woods and, on the verge of starvation, stumble on a strange house in the wilderness with a sumptuous feast laid out on the table. The house is owned by a mysterious old woman named Hulda, played by Alice Krige, who offers the weary children food and lodging. Over the course of their stay, Gretel is tormented by disturbing dreams and slowly uncovers Hulda's horrifying history and the ghastly source of all those delicious feasts.
Yum, yum, yum.
Well, actually, I'd say the opposite of yum, yum, yum. More of a yuck, yuck, yuck situation. Even when the food in this movie is in its quote-unquote appetizing state, I find it very off-putting.
And this is coming from the person who was advocating eating puppy dog tails a little while ago.
Okay. And let me be clear. I'm only talking about cruelty-free puppy dog tails. The rest of the puppy dog is preserved, and it's fine.
Oh my God! Just when you see a dog running around with a snip tail, that's what you're talking about.
Exactly.
Where those snip tails go.
Yeah, there's a lot of dogs who there's a lot of dogs where it's just a natural part of raising them that they lose their tails. And I'm just saying, make use of that. You know, the earth gave it to us.
They lose their tails.
Well, I mean,
what do you think happens to their tails?
No, you're right. I don't think that they drop off in the way that a lizard's tail might. But clearly, the breeders take their tails for what I'm hoping is a good reason. Oh God, are they not taking those dogs' tails away for a good reason? I thought it was to help the dogs.
I'm not even going to get into that. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't in a Truman thinks a tail falls off of a dog situation.
They take the tails off and take them to a happy farm where they can run around and play with all of the other dog tails.
Oh, the tail yard. Interesting. Let's go down.
That sounds like a good name for a pub. I'd watch a game at the tail yard.
Let's just go down the main crew of this again, because this is not a populated movie.
No, it is not.
So we've got a couple notable actors here. I mean, notable characters to fill out. So Sophia Lillis is playing Gretel. A difference that we'll get into momentarily. She is a 16-year-old Gretel to the 10-year-old Hansel, who is played by Samuel Leakey.
Yeah.
The Borg Queen herself, Alice Krige, is playing the witch.
It's Krige and not Krige? Oh man, I only bring it up because I felt so confident in the way that I stated it.
It might be Krieg, I haven't heard Krige, but she is South African, so I if I'm not doing authentic pronunciations,
I looked up a
apologies.
YouTube pronunciation of her name, as I have started doing lately, and it said Krige.
Was it one of those AI things? It's just Alice Krige.
I mean, well, it definitely wasn't a real person's voice saying it. Oh man, first I thought that the puppy dog tails were just falling off. Then I thought that the pronunciation guides on YouTube could be trusted. What else is going to get rocked in my world today? I sure hope the food that this witch has been giving me is totally on the level. Yum, yum, yum. Cakes and pies.
So what's interesting, and I got two more people to go into here, is Alice Krige plays the witch. All of the documentation you see about this movie, she's called Hulda. Nowhere in the movie is her name used. So
yeah.
That's just kind of like, I don't know. We call her the witch.
Okay, I didn't want to just go ahead and label her the witch right out the gate, but everything she does in this movie is hella witchy, so that's not
credit. That's her credit in the credits, is the witch.
Wow, okay, well then, yeah, that's totally on me just going to Wikipedia for character names when I wrote my synopsis. I promise I watched the movie, though.
There is a younger version, kind of. We'll get into that, but someone playing a younger witch, that is Jessica DeGao. And we have a scene. I should have pulled the mother too, because that's another like dialogue scene. And we have someone that's playing a hunter, Charles Babalola.
Yeah, and the mother is played by Fiona O'Shaughnessy.
Yeah, but then I was like, but if we do that, then we got to bring up the weird guy that's trying to hire her, or as a mistress or something.
Yeah. I think that's Jonathan Gunning playing emaciated man. Yeah.
No. That's the weird zombie guy. Oh my God, we're previewing so many things we're going to talk about in this episode.
Folks, if you've heard the very old fairy tale that this story is based on, you've probably had it previewed for you already. There is not a lot of major departures.
I don't know. I don't remember zombies being in the original Hansel and Gretel story.
Well, you missed a lot in the translation out of German.
Got it. Okay, since this is a small cast, we also have a pretty small crew. This is Oz Perkins' second film, so there are just a few people I want to call out. I know we don't usually go beyond the writers, but it's directed by Oz Perkins.
Yeah.
Written by Rob Hayes. Produced by Brian Kavanaugh Jones and Fred Berger. The cinematographers, who I really want to name now and then talk about later. Gallo Olivares, who had previously done, well, I guess after this film, did Alien Romulus, which I think, despite how you feel about the film, is one of the better looking Alien films in a while.
Now I'm really sold on seeing that movie based on how good this looked.
Yeah.
And did Gallo Olivares also do Longlegs?
No, it does not seem he did Longlegs.
Interesting.
He's had a pretty diverse career since this film, doing all kinds of international projects, including Alien Romulus. But I think another telling thing is he was part consultant, part just helper on the Alfonso Cuarón film Roma, which is just one of those beautiful black and white films I think in the last 20 years.
Good looking movie, real good looking movie.
Yeah.
Much like Hansel and Gretel, or shall I say Granzel and Hedel. Yep, Granzel and Hedel, that's what we're calling it. Have you ever been so misogynistic that you couldn't even fully complete the woman's name at the front of the title?
Lastly, I want to call out Rob Cordert, who did the score for this, because it's a huge component to the vibe. The overall takeaway of this film.
When I was watching this at first, I was like, this sounds like above ground swimming pool disaster piece, and then I stopped and said, no, this is fully landscaped pool disaster piece. This is the same tier as the electronic music score from It Follows.
Absolutely, yeah, and so many. Like, it put me in mind of Panos Cosmatos films like Beyond the Black Rainbow and Mandy. Like, it has that kind of... It's an electronic score, but it I think relies more on ambient tones and like just atmosphere than it does like real musical themes. This is coming from someone who has no idea what music is, so I don't know the terminology, but like, it's just it's a character in the film.
Yes,
to use to be trite about it.
The coming from someone who was in various band programs for like 10 or 12 years of his life, I basically co-sign everything Landon says. It's just really creepy and cool as hell.
Well, okay, before we start talking about this film, let's look into some of the numbers because this is kind of interesting.
Yes.
Okay. So,
well, what part is interesting to you?
Well, I'll point it out when we get there.
Oh, okay. Or maybe, as with all truly interesting things, it will just be evident how interesting it is when we hear it. Maybe it doesn't require the preamble. Yeah.
I'll never tell.
Speaking of haunting and creepy musical cues.
All right, this was released. Tug at collar, January 31st, 2020.
Mm-hmm. Hey.
What kind of terrifying things are on the horizon?
Yeah, talk about a sense of impending doom.
This was released by United Artists Releasing.
Talk about sitting inside a house eating large amounts of food and having haunting nightmares.
You're doing a COVID joke, not a United Artists joke.
No, I'm not. Although I don't know. I mean, maybe the reason that company had so many financial hard times was because they were too busy sitting inside eating all their food.
Interesting. I don't remember the last movie I saw that had an Orion Pictures logo at the beginning of it, and it was like just the best dopamine hit.
I love it, and it's the old Orion Pictures logo too. It's like you've popped in a VHS tape, and the first few seconds of it match with it, and then suddenly you get this very crisp and pure and cleanly shot movie that looks very much of its time.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a small little tiny film, like both in terms of its cast, in terms of its crew, in terms of its story. It's pared down, it's simple.
Its budget.
And yet, do you want to guess how many theaters this was released into?
I'm pretty sure I got this through, I guess you could say, osmosis. But it's director Oz Perkins. But this is a 3,000 boy, isn't it? Yeah.
This is 3,007 theaters, which is insane.
Unbelievable. So like honestly, like I'm glad that this movie was given this level of exposure, but also on a business level, it feels kind of like a mistake to put this movie
a little
malls,
irresponsible.
Malls across suburban America. Like, do you want to watch Gretel and Hansel?
Yeah, that is fascinating to me that they had the confidence, or they had the I mean, it is January, which is generally the desert month of movies, but
but it's gotta cost more to put this movie in 3,000 theaters than it does to put it in 200 theaters in art house douchebag locations. This was just. And also, Oz Perkins, yes, had directed a couple other movies, but he wasn't so big. He didn't have so much juice that he could, demand a wide release like this.
No, and I don't think he would have, but...
Yeah, he seems like a cool guy.
He'd only done one film before this, which was The Black Coat's Daughter, which is a fantastic film, but it's also small and atmospheric, and he got a lot of exposure through Sundance through that. There's a lot of hubbub about oh, this is a director to watch, and this is the film he follows it up with.
Well, he'd also done I Am the Pretty Thing That Lives in the House. Oh my God,
you're right. However,
schooled Landon on a horror movie. Suck it.
To my defense,
it's
a Netflix movie, not a theatrical release movie.
Oh, okay. So 80% of the movies that get made now just flat out don't count.
Yeah, well, you're rolling your eyes. That's half the premise of the show is to do wide release theatrical films.
Okay, I get it. But it's as though in your personal life you have also closed off.
I have.
Yeah.
Because I watched that movie 2 times, and it's the bad version of today's movie, the one that doesn't work. The poetic narration and kind of eerie atmosphere without justification. Yeah.
Would we call the narration in this movie poetic?
We'll get to it.
Would we call the narration in this movie something that works?
We'll get there.
I'm perhaps tipping a little bit of my hand.
Okay, so despite 3,000 theaters, this debuts at... What's our theme song for Magic number 4?
Magic number 4. I don't know. There's probably some Sesame Street music that we can use one time and then get sued into oblivion by Big Bird. Yeah, exactly. So wait, is it? But it's the Quattro.
It came in at number 4. Yes.
Oh boy! Hey, a visit from an old friend. We thought we'd never see another one of these.
In fact, I want to run down a little bit of the top 10 box office because I think it really paints what January looks like at the cinema.
Yeah, January 2020. Let's all flash back to a time.
Well, okay, so you've got new big blockbusters coming out that tend to dominate. Like, they know it's going to be a desert. Let's put a big one in there. Bad Boys for Life is in number 1.
Nice.
Then you also have rollovers from award season still playing. So number 2, 1917.
Oh, okay, man. Oof, feels like a while ago. All right.
Yeah.
But another very visually stunning, technically impressive film.
Yes. Again, back to the blockbuster side. Probably came out right at the beginning of the year. Doolittle.
Oh man, yeah. Speaking of inconsistent accents, yes.
Then you have Gretel and Hansel, and just around at the top 5. And you know what? I'm going to do the whole top 10 today.
Fuck it. Let's
man.
Let's overindulge, much like young Hansel.
Why not? You know what? This is the episode to do that.
These movies are all made out of snips and snails and puppy dog tails.
The Gentleman. Guy Ritchie's The Gentleman comes in at number 5.
Snippy and snaily.
Jumanji: The Next Level at number 6.
Yeah. Huh.
Rise of Skywalker.
Have you kids seen The Rise of the Skywalker yet? Somehow Palpatine's returned.
That comes in at number 7. The Turning, which would be like the competition for this movie. It was a adaptation of Turning of the Screw, kind of low budget, short, release schedule sort of thing. That probably came out at the beginning of the year. Little Women, again, Oscar holdover.
Yeah, another kind of female empowerment movie, another coming of age situation.
And The Rhythm Section, which I don't know. I don't know if that's a Nick Carter movie or if that is a Andrew Garfield movie.
or a jazz documentary.
I seem to remember it was an Andrew Garfield movie, but I could be confusing it with Tick Tick Boom.
But that's an.
I know what it was.
It's
an
an assassin movie.
Yeah, Blake Lively as the jackal type assassin, disguises and stuff.
As she disguises herself as a drummer or a bass player or a guitarist, pianist perhaps. A lot of places to hide a gun and a piano. That'd probably be what I'd disguise myself as.
Interesting.
So if you ever see me sitting at a piano, turn and run. I've taken up a new line of work. Or I'm about to play the worst music you've ever heard in your life.
All right. Gretel and Hansel stayed in theaters only for 5 weeks. Spent 2 of those weeks in the top 10.
Wow.
It had an estimated $5 million budget, not much at all. So probably, as we discussed before, even a less marketing budget.
Tough movie to market. Tough.
Yeah.
Not a lot of meat on that puppy dog tail that you can cut up into a trailer.
Maybe we'll talk about that during our trailer game next week. But what did this film earn? It, on a $5 million budget, earned domestically $15.3 million, so triples its budget.
Yeah.
Internationally brings in another $7 million for approximately $22.3 million. I think that is a moderate success based on the budget.
A moderate success based on the budget, yes, but also what are just the input costs of showing a movie in 3,000 theaters? Like,
I would love to
know
that
all those
information.
Places
because
this is a
digital. This is a digital movie. I don't think there's prints.
Wow.
They send the hard drive. So how much does that affect the bottom line? I don't know. I'd be curious.
I mean, look, I am not trying to throw any shade at a movie being made on a tiny budget and getting wide released and turning a profit. That's awesome and that's amazing. I'm just wondering at the scale that this was released at, does turning a profit of, say, $10 million after you think about marketing, everything else, like, is that enough to actually pencil out across thousands of theaters?
That's a good question. I would love to know the answer. If scaling up the amount of theaters scales up the cost as well.
Oh, man, much like the movie Gretel and Hansel, we open up some questions that don't really have answers.
It certainly would have back in the day, but now with everything being digital, I don't know.
Yeah. It's hard to say. Technology, man, the most frightening treat of all.
No, there is a more frightening treat coming around the corner. When I ask you the question, where was this movie when it came out in your awareness bubble, and had you seen it before?
I certainly have not seen it before. Was not aware of this movie. I mean, I think that I have... There have been so many Hansel and Gretel movies. There have been so many fairy tales adapted into wide-release blockbusters. Like, how many effing Nutcracker movies did they make? They tried to make the Nutcracker into, like, a...
Well, how far back are you talking about?
Well, I'm just talking about in the last 10 to 15 years. I feel like there...
I can't think of a single Nutcracker movie.
Let's see, there's Nutcracker Battle of the Four Realms, right? Suggesting multiple realms. No, I promise I'm not making this up.
Wait, are you kidding? I thought you were making a Lord of the Rings joke.
No, they were trying to make a Lord of the Rings franchise out of public domain Russian opera. Look it up, Landon. Right. Look it up. I mean, the machine is just is speaking through me right now. I've been possessed by it. So there's things like that out there. There's Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters. I know the Brothers Grimm movie is older than this, but that was also in the mix. So I think I'm just like I've seen so many marketing campaigns and posters for the edgy new remake of a fairy tale or a children's story that I'm just like, if this one got in front of my face at all, my reaction would just be like, get out of here, stop it, stop doing that. I won't. So no, I only really gave this movie any more thought post having my world rocked by Oz Perkins' subsequent feature Longlegs, and my friends who I told about it saying, oh yeah, he also made Gretel and Hansel, and that was pretty good. So between that and the movie sending it to me, there was nothing else. What about you? How many times did you see this in theaters?
All right, here's we talked about this a tiny bit during Reminiscence. This was the second to last film I saw in theaters before the COVID pandemic hit.
Wow.
Yeah, it was this and then The Invisible Man, and then like the next week theaters went under.
That's tough. That's I guess you went out on a couple of bangers though, right? I mean, yeah. Really unsettling movies.
I felt so.
Yeah,
absolutely. This is like whatever the marketing can. I mean, granted, this is a period of time when I was like supporting horror films in theaters. I'm like, if it's at all in that world, I'm gonna go spend some money on it. Mm-hmm. And so like it kind of had my buy-in almost no matter what. Maybe not entirely no matter what, but.
It's usually safe to bet that a horror movie has your buy-in, I think. In
depending. Yeah. It's not across the board anymore, but
sure. Yeah, the next Hostel movie they make, probably you won't be in the theater for that one.
But yeah, this one I had already seen Blackcoat's Daughter and loved it. It inspired a short story that I wrote. So like this is his, whatever he's doing is like his vibe is my vibe. Like I saw an interview with him, I think it was during the Blackcoat's Daughter junket.
Yeah.
Where someone was quoting himself to himself saying, "You don't make movies for everyone." And he goes, "Yeah, that's right. I don't make movies." I know. He's like, "I know I don't make movies for everyone. And, I just want to make these kinds of movies. And if they resonate with someone, they do. So I'm one of the few people he makes movies for."
And I just love that even with that attitude, the United Artists was like, no, 3,000 theaters. He does make movies for everyone. We're gonna find the people who Oz Perkins makes movies for.
Well, yeah. I mean, if I hadn't seen Blackcoat's Daughter, this probably would have been my introduction to him. So I can't fault that strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so I saw this in the theater and it stuck with me. What I'm kind of interested in getting into today is like, not a lot of details stuck with me. This is a very kind of elusive film to hold in your brain.
Yeah, not in a bad way.
Yeah, right. Even though it's filled with just like incredible imagery that,
yes,
the thing is, there are shots of this film that, like, if you put a little bit of time between when I watched it and asked me, like, you showed me a still from the film that isn't like specifically one of their faces, like her looking through the keyhole. Or the peephole, which is a triangle. Like, I wouldn't be able to tell you that was from this film. Like, I would say that's a beautiful image. I don't know that I've seen it before, but I certainly wouldn't be able to connect it to today's film.
There are so many shots in this movie that look like something you would see in a museum exhibition of works by a famous photographer. Yeah,
I kind of, one thing kind of occurred to me at one point, which is, you could pause this movie at any point and take that frame and turn it into the cover of the book.
Yes. Any given frame from this movie could be the desktop background for a kind of artsy graphic designer who is freelancing at your office. Like, he or she opens up their laptop and it's like the witch healer in the perfectly triangle-shaped black form, or the jet black armored carriage being pulled by a white horse with a little girl inside it. Like, there's just every frame in this movie is a painting. I coined that term. And I also think a shot across the bow, perhaps for you, I think also that elevates this movie into the rare pantheon of great movies to put on mute in background at a party.
I wouldn't be offended by that.
Now, and with the caveat, kind of a fucked up party. You were creating a certain vibe with Gretel and Hansel on in the background, but it would be evocative.
People I'm inviting to my party know my vibe, so I don't think they'd be surprised by it.
Yes. And if they don't know your vibe, they will realize it the second they walk in the door and see a silent footage of a woman pulling an entire braid out of her mouth on your big TV.
Can I take a little side tangent that's kind of related to this, but I think just kind of important regarding, like, the way, not being too precious about how people find movies, because what you just described of, like, I actually think that's a brilliant way to introduce people to this movie. I was not into horror at all. I was very squeamish and very reticent against watching horror, but in my first year of community college, took a horror sci-fi class, and this teacher, and I wish I knew who he was. I would look him up again and just kind of, like, touch, like, see what his intentions were, because he put together, I remember it was one specific day of class, and he showed us a thing he put together that was the mausoleum scene in Phantasm, which is just the scene with the metal ball chasing the kid down the corridors. He showed us the opening scene of Suspiria, where the incident, I'm not going to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it, but the incident happens around the stained glass window. And then he showed us an extended sequence from the movie Battle Royale, the Japanese movie. But it was the first two, Phantasm and Suspiria, that were both, like, pure cinema. They didn't rely on dialogue or story. It was just like, here is an operatic and kind of psychedelic scenario, and it was telling the story. I didn't know the grander story of these characters, but, like, I knew the story of that kid in that moment was in a mausoleum where he shouldn't have been, and this ball starts chasing him, and, like, I didn't know anything about the movie. Seeing those two scenes made me go seek out those movies later, and Suspiria is one of my all-time favorite movies. I don't think it would have been if I hadn't been introduced to it that way.
There was something that I think Alfred Hitchcock said about how a truly great movie you could show in Japan with no subtitles and everyone would still get what's going on. Like that just images, composition, that just what you are seeing conveys the drama of the story to you without the need for words.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a huge, I don't know that it started with him, but he's definitely a huge proponent of that style of compositional filmmaking.
Yeah.
Guillermo del Toro is also a big proponent of. He calls it pure cinema. Capital P, capital C. That wasn't my pretentious term applying to it. That's kind of what they call it.
And I think that also Mad Max Fury Road, I think, is a recent example of a movie where you don't need to hear what anybody is saying. You can figure out the stakes of every scene and what's going on. I mean, a movie that is also one entire car chase, because it's pretty easy to get the lay of the land at any given time.
Yeah, so sound designers take note. Truman Cap says, "You aren't important."
Well, and that's the thing. Because the sound design of this movie and the soundtrack is a huge part of it. So it's like, I would play this on mute at a party. I would have the soundtrack going. Boy, this is a really fucked up party. Guys, don't come to anything I invite you to. I'd have the soundtrack going.
Just push play. Why are you setting up all this complicated stuff?
Because I don't like the voiceover in this movie, and I have thoughts about the voiceover. What I'm saying is, I'm not trying to put down sound designers. I'm trying to put down screenwriters. That's right. Shame on my people.
Okay, well, so can we start the conversation here, which is
in the woods.
This is a movie called Gretel and Hansel.
That's been well established.
Based on the story by the Grimm's fairy tales of Hansel and Gretel.
Yes.
Do you notice the change, the subtle change there?
Yeah. It looks like the woke mind virus got involved here, and suddenly we had to feminism the whole thing up. Yeah, the story very squarely centers on Gretel's experiences, and I think, as you mentioned, it alters their ages so that Hansel is much younger, probably about half of Gretel's age.
Well, and that was in the initial story, that was the age of both of them. They weren't both teenagers; they were both really young. And so by making it, this is Gretel's story essentially, and so it is making strives to put her front and center and tell a coming of age story for her.
Do you think if they were like, is it that teenagers would be too smart to just find a house made out of food and start eating it without a second thought? Is that only the sort of thing that a child would do?
You're talking about the original story?
Yeah, the original story. Like the Grimm brothers were like, no, we gotta pull down their ages. The focus groups hate this thing that teenagers are eating a house made of cake.
Well, that's kind of an interesting question, because I had a moment. I did go back and read the original story, but before I did that, like after watching the movie twice, and then before reading the story, I had a moment of doubt where I'm like, do they eat the house in the original thing, or is that some sort of weird fucking cartoon adaptation that I saw as a kid, and that became my telling of Gretel and Hansel?
Well, I mean,
Hansel and Gretel.
Isn't that just like the oral tradition at work, though? Like, everybody just retells the story as it's been most memorably told to them. I mean, that's what the Brothers Grimm did. They just took a folk tale and kind of wrote it down.
A generational game of telephone.
Talk about a name for a podcast right there.
So I was actually shocked to see that in the story they eat the house. They don't eat the house in this. They eat within the house.
Yes.
There is lots of food. It is a house of food.
Yes.
It's just not made of food. Like, well, I don't know. No one tries to eat the house. Maybe it's made of black licorice.
Well, they say, like, when Hansel is running up to the house, there's a slide out front, and he's smelling it and says, "It smells of bacon." So it's implied that the house itself is putting out food smells. But he doesn't try to eat the slide.
So does my local baker.
So do you try to eat the building?
I can't tell you how much dental work I have racked up biting into the brick, thinking it is some tasty marshmallow filling. The brick looks like nougat.
The witch who runs the bakery is in league with the dentist, and that's the thing now. It's not about eating children. It's about fleecing middle-aged men with sweet tooths. Yeah, well, but yes, but it's the slide itself smells like bacon, but he does not. Yeah, but
well, listen, I've gone down a slide as a kid in the middle of summer with too short of shorts on. I can think of other ways of that thing smelling like bacon than it actually being made of bacon.
Wow. Man, I mean, folks, welcome to the body horror of Gretel and Hansel. I'm glad that they don't try to eat the house, because the witch's house in this movie looks dope as hell. It is such a cool design. It's like this weird A-frame. Like, this movie is set in a fantasy world, you know, a fairy tale world, but it's very minimalistic. Like, you barely see any buildings or any signs of society. And yet, like, the house just looks like the sort of... It looks like the sort of house that, like, a really cool ski bum would live in the 70s. Like, like, you know, you go in there and he's have some brandy and some fondue, and I don't know. It seems like a cool dude's Swiss chalet in Aspen.
We don't know where this is. Maybe this is Fairytale Aspen.
Yeah, you know, Hunter S. Thompson is running for sheriff somewhere nearby. That's my piece of Aspen material, I guess.
I'm glad you brought that up, though, because it would be very easy to look at this and go, like, this isn't period accurate, you know? And it's going to be the first of many touch points to the voiceover narration in this that we can talk about. But
yes,
this is a world that doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it roots it a little bit in, like, some familiarity of our idea of medieval culture, kind of.
Yeah.
But I think it's really well constructed. All of the production design, the costume design. I paused it once to get up and go to the bathroom. I'm not going to relitigate my bathroom habits while watching this. I paused it this time.
Okay, it's a lot easier to walk away from Lightning Jack than it is to walk away from Gretel and Hansel.
Okay.
I mean, I still don't forgive you. Yeah, I did.
You took me to task for explaining my bathroom habits on that episode.
Well, no, I took you to task for not watching the whole movie.
I think I'm going to take you to task for remembering which episode I went to the bathroom in the middle of.
I mean, look, Landon, I have a journal labeled Landon's bathroom habits.
All right. I paused it to get up to go to the bathroom at one point, and when I came back, it was paused on Sophia Lillis, and I was just like, the way it was framed made me look at her costuming, and I kind of like paused and looked at it with, you know, kind of a cocked head for a minute, because I'm like, that's not medieval at all.
No.
It kind of looks like it might be if you don't think about it too much, but if you took her in that costume out of that world and put her in a future science fiction film, like the costume would fit in just as well. It's kind of remarkable.
She has this weird, like, neck thing that she wears. I can't.
It's like an untied bow tie almost.
Yeah, but it's like rigid enough to like fasten. Yeah, and like a hat or a kind of almost a fedora, honestly, that she wears. But yeah,
her and Josh Gad on the Poseidon boat going down together.
You know what? They could fly away on a broom together, probably.
Oh, that's true.
Or at least float on it, even if you can't make it fly. I mean, there's buoyancy there. Yeah, no, the costumes are very noticeable, and just every scene also is deprived of anything superfluous. Like, there are not other people in the frame ever besides the principal cast. There's not people walking around in the background. There is not a shot of a old-timey cobblestoned street with buildings along it. There is occasionally shots inside a building. There's a remarkable scene very early in the movie where she's interviewing for a job, and it's just her in a room with one really creepy-looking guy and sounds of people fucking emanating through all the walls. So you just always feel very alone, very isolated, very unsettled.
And the unsettling nature, I think, is what I wanted to pull out here, because it's so subtle how he achieves this in a lot of the scenes, where it'll be a combination of the set being a little bit not right, combined with a very unique camera placement. So like there's lots of he uses lots of negative space, lots of symmetry, lots of lower shots looking up at characters at times, lots of putting the character in the lower part of the frame. And what that does is like it disorients you in your space. And it puts me in mind again of Suspiria, where one of the things Argento did on that film was it's essentially a group of girls at a ballet school, but they're all played by like 30-year-olds. So
like
how
any
do you...
given teen movie, yes.
Well, but there's a huge difference in that he tells them to play it like little girls, and he supports this weird kind of broken like dichotomy between those things by like little things you don't notice in the film. He puts all the doorknobs like 2 feet higher, so they have to reach up to turn the door. Like he's turning them into children, but he's turning them into children in our minds. Like we look at that in our subconsciouses. Remember when you were little and you didn't know what was behind the door and you had to reach up, and like it's that sort of stuff that I think this film is doing, where it's like she has to open a pantry door and then it moves to a very low shot on her, and then we cross cut to seeing a smaller door, and you're like, how is this geography working exactly? And it's just very unsettling.
Yeah, so much spatially inside the witch's house does not make sense. I mean, the house as it looks from the outside is so much smaller than the house that they're walking around in for the rest of the movie, which is one of those kind of things you don't fully compute, but contributes to the sense of unease.
Yeah.
Also, a thing that really is striking, I think, visually, and contributes to how unsettling the movie is that a lot of the shots, it is Sophia Lillis, when she is here listening to someone off screen or someone is talking to her, she is in the center of the frame looking right at you, and it's implied that the person talking is behind you, which I think I'm mainly aware of from the movie Silence of the Lambs, which evidently was a huge influence on Oz Perkins, based on Longlegs being very thematically similar. But where it's like you're kind of just always being watched, and you always have a pair of eyes on you, and that makes it, I don't know, that just, there's nothing overtly scary about it, but it's enough to kind of like prickle your skin a little bit.
And I think this, with the symmetry of this, really points to Kubrick as an influence.
I love it.
Even if it's subconsciously, there's a thing called the Kubrick close-up, and you see it in Clockwork Orange, you see it a lot in The Shining. It's this kind of symmetrical shot. Sometimes it's a push-in on the character's face, and they're kind of looking, their head is angled downward, but they're looking up through the top of their eyelids at you in this kind of evil-like fashion. But they are looking directly at the camera, i.e. what you're saying, like you feel like you're being complicit in something, or you're being confronted by something. It's a really effective way of telling this. Yeah.
So, I mean, there's really no point to trying to go chronologically through this movie. I mean, it's Hansel and Gretel get cast out of their house, they wander in the woods, they find a witch. But I do want to highlight something early on that you referenced, which is the zombie interlude.
Yes, there are a number of interludes we need to talk about, and we could talk about them in a vacuum, because the zombie interlude is like,
it's like its own little movie.
It's not necessary to the story, really. I mean, you could excise it.
Yeah, I'm glad they didn't. But early on they take shelter in this house in the country that appears to be unoccupied, and then whilst lying there talking to each other side by side on mats on the floor, we see behind Gretel just this other person rise up from the floor behind her, who seems to be some sort of ghoul or zombie or something, and he just flat out chases them out of the house and tackles Hansel and is about to eat him until Gretel and a friendly huntsman intervenes.
Again, a 7-year-old gets tackled to the ground by this massive... I mean, it looks like one of those aliens from Prometheus, to go back to Alien for a bit.
Yeah, big, tall, pale, not
bald.
Fully right. Yes, incredibly bald.
I started thinking about dicks for some reason.
Oh, interesting. Another kind of lightning jack reference. Yeah, but so this is a thing that doesn't really tie into the rest of the movie at all, and I've seen people online, both in reviews on Reddit or actual professional reviews of the movie, saying that it's like a pointless scene or a diversion, or it feels like something added by the studio. But I don't know. I find it very effective and very frightening, and just that them being full on just chased out of the building and like across the yard of this house by this creature. It felt like just the stuff out of a nightmare for me, the sort of thing I would wake up screaming about as a kid.
This is the sort of layered scene that I find really impressive about this film, because it does tap into the kind of childhood fears of things. I was at a fair when I was a kid with some friends, and one of the workers operating the merry-go-round that we were on was very adamant about people not getting up off the horse before it came to a complete stop. Mm-hmm. And my friend, being at the age that he was, was impressing a girl. I mean, it wasn't that he jumped off mid-ride. It was coming to a slow stop, but he still got off, and the operator got mad at him, and he, like, overly mad at him. And he thought it was such an extreme reaction that he had to be joking, and so he kind of laughed it off. And then the guy chased him, like,
what?
Pissed off. The operator chased him around the fair.
Whoa.
Yeah, so, like, that is very much the sort of primal fear that this film, I think, can tap into, is like when something bigger than you just decides you are its target.
Yeah.
Like, what are you going to do about that?
Now, but the most important question, was the girl impressed? Are they married now?
I checked, they got married. So
wait, really? Oh my God, this is beautiful. It's what a happy ending. So that both means that it worked, and also that carnival worker didn't kill your friend.
Yeah, that's true.
So any children listening to this, do not obey safety instructions at carnivals. That is the coolest thing you can do is piss off the ride operators.
So there's that aspect of it, which I think is really cool, the kind of visceral, bring you into the moment, the action of it moment, or touch. But there's also this other kind of very subtle, not in your face world building that happens in this scene that I feel like other filmmakers would just be like, oh man, this is gonna be my moment to create a franchise. I'm really gonna paint out like all these details that people are gonna have questions about later, and then I'm gonna do all these spin-offs.
Yeah.
This film is just like, if you see it, you see it, and it's fine. It's just subtly building the kind of world that we're living in here. But when they go into this house, there are very subtle upside down crucifixes throughout it. Like, there's not a insert shot of one, there's not a prominent one anywhere, but they're just around and no one comments on them. And then the reveal of this creature coming up next to them is also very, like, subconsciously unnerving, because you get a sense of the room where they're gonna lie down before they lie down.
Yeah.
And there's nothing there.
Yeah.
And if they had seen something, they would have, like, said something.
Yeah.
It's not till they're laying down and that the guy arises that it's like, well, where the fuck did he come from? It's almost like he's rising up out of hell. And it's a very almost like Fulci sort of touch, where it's like this weird madness on the edges of reality.
Yeah. And also, there's just madness everywhere. And it's not just like, oh, we left town and it gets madder. It's like, even in their mom's house, like the one scene with their mom, she's threatening them with an axe and snorting like a pig at them. Like, there's never any safe place. But it's like, oh, I thought it couldn't get worse than it was at home, but now there's just random ghouls coming out of the floor and chasing after me.
Yeah, but at the same time, like, just to kind of fully paint the picture, you don't walk away from that scene going, oh my God, they live in a world where ghouls rise out of the ground. It's just kind of like, it's very matter of fact. A man appears and then chases them. Yeah. It's not like, it doesn't take the moment to go, oh my God, look at the ground starting to split and a hand coming out and a man, dust falling off and the maggots coming out of his eye. Like, it's just this weird specter appears and chases them. It's kind of weird.
I read an interview where someone asked Oz Perkins about that scene and what it meant, and his response was kind of just like, I don't know, it's a fucked up world. There's zombies around. It's a scary place to be. Like he clearly does not think that this needs any explanation, which I cannot endorse enough. We just gotta not explain things.
I really appreciate him. Every interview I've seen, I'm just like, yeah, that was the exact right response to that question.
Yes.
But so they have a bunch of these like little interludes like this until they get to the witch's house. They're saved by a hunter in that moment.
Yeah. Who is the first person in the movie who's like nice and cool and seems to want to help them. And I'm thinking in that scene, okay, so all right, it has been a cruel and uncompromising world, but here's this guy who's taken them in and fed them and is competent and large and in charge and is gonna, okay, this is one of our core protagonists. Nope, he's in that one scene. He gives them some food. He says, hey, walk through the big scary woods that direction. You can get some work as woodcutters on the other end of the forest.
Yeah.
And don't die. And
don't die. But okay, so let's start to talk about the VO. Because this is a scene where the VO, I think, is very important to this movie. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. There are two kinds of VO in this movie, and I'm not opposed to all of them. The movie starts with a parable or a fairy tale of sorts narrated by the witch in voiceover that is telling the story of a little girl who was sickly, and her father took the girl to a witchy type healer, and in exchange for healing the girl, this darkness was implanted within her, which then gave her clairvoyance but also made her evil and led her to kill all of her family.
Let's circle back to that story because there's stuff I want to touch on. It's basically the tale of the girl in the pink hat.
Sure, yes. The tale of the girl in the pink hat, but that's all explained in voiceover. That's awesome. That's a creepy-ass story. Yeah. Sets you up for a creepy movie. Then through the rest of the movie, periodically Gretel will come in and narrate about what's going on and explain what's happening. And the thing is, nothing that's happening really needs to be explained, and I don't really need Gretel to explain her state of mind to me because Sophia Lillis is doing a perfectly fine job conveying that. And there's also a lot of occasions in the movie where the language and the way that Gretel is voiceovering kind of like detracts from the atmosphere of what's going on. Like, case in point, later on in the movie, they're at the witch's house and Gretel has finally found out, oh shit, the witch is conjuring this food out of the dead bodies of children, which she's seen down in the basement. And
AKA the witch's ding dong.
Yeah.
Not dead yet.
This is the witch's ding dong. Just you put you're blindfolded and they're having you touch a cold hot dog. So, but
why is it cold?
Because it's creepy. It's creepy. I mean, a hot dog is one thing, a warm hot dog, but a cold one, even worse. It's like the bowl of grapes. But she has seen all this. The witch has not seen that Gretel has seen this. And then we've got Gretel back upstairs, like, trying to act like everything's normal. And we get voiceover from her saying, the horror under the house was only proof of what I already knew. All I could do was keep calm and play dumb.
Yeah.
It's like, it's pretty clear what calculus she's made, and that like, we don't need that explained. And also using the term, like, keep calm and play dumb sounds like something that somebody, like a private investigator in a noir movie, would tell someone to prepare them to be questioned by the cops. That does not fit with this fantasy environment. And I'm not suggesting this was an artistic choice that was made freely, just for the record.
Well, yeah. Oz Perkins, up until Longlegs, likes voiceover. And I'm the Pretty Thing That Lives in the House is just wall-to-wall this stuff in a way that does not work. Like, there's less that happens in that film and more of that sort of VO, and it's just kind of painful. Here, though, a problem with the VO is that it's performed like someone reading a edited diary entry. It's not like your free association thoughts. It's not like listening to a podcast.
No jokes about cold hot dogs in it. It's terrible.
it's being presented as if they're thoughts in the moment, but really they are being performed like someone had a thought, wrote it down, figured out the best way to articulate that, had an editor look at it and say, okay, that looks good for print, put that in your diary, and then read verbatim what that was into their VO.
This is an excerpt from Gretel's memoir that she's
Right.
had published. You're at a reading or something, yeah.
However,
her tell-all about her time in the witch's house.
Yeah, because of that, there are unnecessary bouts of VO like you just described, where, yeah, that wasn't necessary. However, there are moments, like the scene with the hunter, where there's no way to get the information across except what's going through her mind, because as he's being nice to her, there's VO to the effect of, can you trust the surface of people? Can you trust people for what they present themselves as?
Yes.
And
because the tale of the girl in the pink hat, the moral of it is, don't take a gift that's given freely. There is always a cost. Everything in this world is transactional.
Yeah. And so, to me, the VO there is, regardless of how you feel about the style of it, what it's conveying there is information I wouldn't have got any other way, of illustrating this sort of like woman's journey into the world, and can you trust the things around you and the people around you? How much do you need to be on your guard at all times? And I think that's pretty important to the theme of what we're talking about in this movie.
Yeah, and I really love the theme that this sets out, of just that you can't trust anything good that happens to you. I mean, it is really feels sort of like a movie about having anxiety to some degree. Like just that it has really created this world in which things are always bad, and if something good is happening, you can't enjoy it or luxuriate in it, because that is only setting you up for something even worse to happen. Every relationship is transactional. There is no mercy. I mean, having that laid out as sort of one of the only kind of indicators of any culture in this world that they inhabit is very chilling.
Mm-hmm. But that's, I think, a theme that even goes over his films. If you saw any of the interview stuff he's done about Longlegs, he talks a little bit about some of the biblical stuff that's in that, or the kind of religious fervor, and he's very on the record saying, I don't buy into any religious stuff at all. None of those beliefs. And I think it kind of speaks to an overarching theme in his films of nihilism. Feels a little harsh, but some sort of like the characters themselves finding meaning rather than meaning within themselves or meaning within their environment, rather than like some grand, design meaning.
It's just people kind of doing what they have to do to get by in an unforgiving environment.
Yeah. Can we take a step back for a second? Because
step away from the subject.
We talked about this on Poltergeist to a small degree, and Vampire in Brooklyn wasn't horror-y enough to really garner the discussion, but you're not a horror guy.
No, I'm not.
And I'm actually a little hesitant to call this a horror film, but
yeah.
What's your general, response to this? Like, were you nervous going into seeing it? Is it something you would seek out moving forward, or tell me about it.
Okay, well, thank you for asking. I'm not a horror guy. I liked this movie a fair amount. I didn't like it as much as Longlegs, which is definitely a horror movie, and I think I like movies that are creepy, and I like movies that are unsettling. I really love Silence of the Lambs, a movie that, I don't know, I don't like to get into that whole discussion of, is this a horror movie, isn't it? Is it quote-unquote elevated horror?
That's why I live outside the horror community.
Yes, of course. Yeah, you live in an exurban area, off the freeway from the horror community. But trying to gatekeep what it is or what it isn't. But I tend to just like, a movie that is very visually unsettling, or that is good at creating a sense of unease without throwing jump scares in your face, which that's really what I don't like. I'm very easily startled.
Well, this film has a few.
Yeah, but they're very subtle. Like, the zombie.
Wait. Can you have a subtle jump scare?
I
Those
think
are two
you can.
contrasting ideas.
The zombie coming up in the house behind
Yeah.
her, it's like you've got her framed up, and then you see this thing slowly starting to rise up behind her. Cut away, cut back to it. It's not like they're slamming something really loud on the soundtrack and throwing a thing up in your face quickly like a scare video on YouTube.
I mean, there's a little bit of that. One or two instances, like with the dream sequence she has in the house for the first time, with seeing the girl in the pink hat.
I guess. Somehow I feel like this and movies of this ilk do a better job of not I can at least trust them that if they're going to do it, they will do it in a way that is not constant and not overwhelming. So. You know, a movie like this I liken to The Shining, which is also, I mean, just a movie I absolutely love, one of my favorite movies, which is horrifying and frightening, but it does it through a sense of dread and unease and things like that. So that's what I really like about this movie, is that it creates a very strong vibe, and there's a lot of things about the movie down the line in the third act that don't necessarily line up, and I forgive it for that completely, because it's like, yeah, fuck it, it's a scary vibe, and that's what counts. I mean, it's the same, people are very critical of how Longlegs ends, and I agree, maybe the plot doesn't 100% hang together, but the vibes are immaculate throughout, and that's, I think what I like so much about Oz Perkins is that it's just, he's not there to scare you with a capital S. He's there to unsettle you by showing you things that might not ordinarily be considered scary, but the context of them makes them that way.
Yeah, there is another interview I saw with him, and I'm going to butcher the paraphrasing here, but like, he was just talking about like, not okay. I'm glad to hear you say that, because when he was comparing like the films he makes to the other like horror films that are out there, he's like, those exist and those are all good and fine, you know, but I'm not making Hereditary. I'm glad that movie exists. Yeah. But, you know, that's not what I'm setting out to do. And I think this was maybe the same interview where he's like, I don't make films for everybody. I make, you know, the films that I want to see. And like, so why I'm glad to hear you say that is I feel like a lot of the criticism hurled at this film is for its pace, its slowness, and maybe you have specific thoughts about that too.
I do,
but I'm trying not to come at this from a defensive place, because like he's not trying to do that other thing, and a lot of people's response to this isn't like this other thing that I like that he's not trying to do. Yes. And so it's like, okay, well, that's not something you can really hold against it. There is a space for slow movies. There's a place for intentional, you know, crafting of something like this. And I think it's unfair to criticize it for it not doing the thing that you want it to be doing.
Yeah. Look, I absolutely, like, one of my gripes with this movie does relate to the pace. But I don't think even for a second that, oh, the pacing of this movie is slow and I lose interest later on in the movie. I don't think of that as, oh, Oz Perkins fucked up or doesn't know what he's doing. It's more just like, I would have liked for this to move at a slightly elevated clip in later scenes. I have thoughts about how it could have held my interest, but I don't think that this is the result of a mistake. I just think he made artistic choices in this movie that was, for some reason, released to 3,000 theaters when really he's making art house choices in a movie that was released like a blockbuster.
Yeah, and you can't blame him for that. I mean... Yeah. He's moving the movie. That's the distributor's choice to decide to put it out that much.
No, yeah, I'm not criticizing him for that. And again, I am not criticizing the distributor for trying to show this movie to as many people as possible. I don't know how you look at this movie and think, yeah, this very slow-paced movie without a lot of straight-up scares in it is going to play big. I mean, this movie is 87 minutes long, and I think it's the longest 87-minute movie I have ever seen. Wow. And again, I'm not going after it for this. It's just, I think that the movie has a deliberate pace throughout. Like, it is moving at a certain clip. Scenes play out slowly with a lot of air and time to kind of consider everything, which is great. I think that the first 30, 40, 45 minutes of the movie, I'm really kept engaged because every scene plays out slowly, but each scene is about a new and different thing.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, we're talking about slow movies. My credentials is that I'm obsessed with Barry Lyndon, arguably the slowest movie ever made. 3 hours.
Not true, but it's up there.
Probably not true. No, but there's that French movie that you really like that's just a lady in her kitchen that
Jean Dielman. And I was gonna bring up a quote from Chantal Akerman who made that movie about slow movies, and she hates the word slow, she hates the word bored, because she's like, in her mind, and this is extreme art house French stuff, but
hell yeah,
she's like, the worst thing in the world to me is when I go to a movie and it blows by, because that is time I've lost. Like I don't have a sense of that time. Her thought process in making slower movies is like, I want you to be aware of the passing time. I want you to feel it, and by doing that, you're immersing yourself in the experience and being present in what you're watching. Like that's part of the whole construction of what she's doing.
Yeah, I understand that, and I respect that, and I do like the ability to sit in a scene and live in the scene and feel the thing, which, so much of Barry Lyndon is a very slow pullout of Ryan O'Neal looking off camera sadly. And I enjoy being able to drink in the imagery and live in the moment of that. Yeah. But also every scene in that movie, once it cuts away from that, there is some new piece of information being delivered in the next scene, and the circumstances escalate and continue. And that's happening for the first 45 or so minutes of this movie. They are in new locations, they have new conflicts and things that they have to solve and fix and whatever. But then they've been in the witch's house for a while. I know, and you can disagree, and that's fine. We're not
I seem to remember some criticism over a little film called Jerry, but that's technically what happens in every scene of that film.
Okay. Hey, you know what? That's the thing. But all the characters in this movie have different names, and no one is, and they're not using the word Gretel as a verb to describe how they got into certain situations.
There was an early version of this called Gretel and Gretel.
Yeah, and then it was Gretel and Jerry, and then it was Tom and Jerry. Has any podcast talked about Gus Van Sant's film Jerry as much as ours?
I don't know. I kind of love that it's become lower, though.
I know. I mean, one might argue it's a forgotten film. I think that as the longer they are in the witch's house, we kind of get into this rhythm of like, okay, there's the witch. There's something creepy about the witch. Hansel is learning how to chop wood every day, and Gretel is doing domestic tasks around the house and kind of learning from the witch. But it's like stuff that's happening is atmospheric and creepy, and it's accomplishing what Oz Perkins wants to accomplish. But just for me, it's like, okay, we've been in this environment for 20 minutes, and nothing meaningfully has changed. Like, they're still living in the witch's house. The witch is still kind of weird. Gretel is not piecing together what is very clearly going on with the witch, and that's fine, but it just, without new revelations or new escalations of the plot, that slow pace of how it's shot and presented to us, and then also the slow pace at which developments are occurring, that's where I start to get a little bit lost and start to look at my watch and think, oh gosh, we still have like 35 minutes of this movie left.
That's very fair.
Thank you.
As far as, a perception of it, I do think there are things that happen in that time. However, to its detriment, and to what you're talking about, I think it's really obscured. You have to dig. Who was it, Paul Thomas Anderson, that talked about having audiences meet him halfway in his movies, or coming more than halfway? I don't know what he said exactly, but
if it's a Paul Thomas Anderson quote, I probably memorized it when I was 16 years old, so I don't remember that one. What is happening here is just, it's almost too subtle to like be able to track. And I'm not trying to like hold that over anybody. Like, oh, you didn't notice what was actually going on. It's too obscured. This is just, again, it's just like the horror movie that gets released to 3,000 theaters is the one that teenagers are going to, and they're making out, and then a jump scare happens that gets their attention
Yes.
and everybody screams. And it's like if God help you if you are trying to make out during Gretel and Hansel.
Because in those,
you're better off getting chased by a carny if you want to impress a girl.
oh my God, dramatic moments. But what's really happening in that scene later on, I think, places an overemphasis on the VO as well, because it's about the subtle ways the witch is separating Gretel and Hansel, manipulating her into. One thing we didn't really talk about is that Gretel also presumably has these powers that become more explicit as the film goes on.
Kind of clairvoyance, second sight.
Yeah. And that there's this kind of open question in the film of, did Hansel and Gretel stumble upon the house, or through all of the subtle inklings of Gretel saying stuff like, I could see things before other people could. I knew the house was there even if I couldn't see it. Talking about the hunter's house. There's this open question that's never answered of, was she going to the witch's house by her free will or by circumstance or happenstance, or was the witch calling her there?
Yeah.
And it's kind of that level of throughout, even in the later scenes, Gretel being imbued with the abilities and knowledge and kind of training to unlock the things within her that the witch is giving her, that if you're not there looking for them specifically, it does just seem like, well, they've been talking at this table for a long time.
Yeah. And again, I'm not mad at a movie that has a lot of scenes of two people talking at a table.
Let me turn you on to a Michael Fassbender, Steve McQueen film called Hunger. There's a 20-minute one-take shot in that film of two people talking at a table.
Look, I can think of someone who would really relate to a movie called Hunger, and his name is Hansel, because that kid spends most of the movie whining about being hungry, and boy...
But Gretel, I'm hungry!
And you know what, man? People online are so mad about Hansel. All these fucking Reddits
really?
About saying like, Hansel's so annoying, I hated him. I fucking love Hansel in this movie. He rocks.
Is so good. This is his first film. Let me talk about him real quick, because there's not too much to say. Samuel Leakey.
Yeah.
This is his first film, and like the level at which he embodies this world.
Yeah.
And like, he's not a precocious. Like, we talked in Poltergeist about kids being good actors now, but they're not kids on screen first and foremost.
Yeah.
This just feels like a kid born of a fairy tale. He is just so built into the world.
Motherfucker loves cake. That's his deal. He's like a shark. He's always looking for cake, and if he stops swimming, he'll die. He is a shark who is hunting cake and trees to chop down. Never has someone been so fixated on logging.
It sounds like a new reality show about to drop on Netflix. Like, first go chop down the tree and make the table, and then bake the cake to put on the table.
Yeah, it's well, I feel like they've some algorithm already made that into a show where it's like half Man vs. Wild, where they drop you in the woods, but then it's also half like a Great British Bake Off, where you have to cook a gourmet meal in the woods with nothing.
It's called Alone with Cake. And there's an exclamation point.
I should be so lucky to be left alone with a cake. No, I don't know. I felt very represented on screen by Hansel. He is just he is very hungry. He's not really good at any useful tasks. He can't really chop down a tree very well. I mean, admittedly, he's a child.
But he has the ambition for it. One of my favorite moments is when they first arrive at the witch's house and they're talking about exchanging their services for the shelter and food. And, Gretel is going through like, I can cook, I can clean, I can tend to animals. And Hansel's just like, I can cut down a tree. And then Gretel's like, he can learn.
Yeah. It's he just says, I can chop wood. It's like, you can't even do that, idiot. You can't.
But he wants to really hard.
Landon, how often? Let's just talk about how we basically lived very similar lives. How often were you as a child like that? Like you're like, I can do this helpful thing, and your parents were like, well, he has a lot of ambition. His heart is in the right place.
I mean, the second part of that, probably not at all. You want to help your dad, like, do something in the basement or with the car or something. Lawn mowers, and like, I think there's a period where you have the like, yeah, I'm gonna do that. I can help out around here. I'm a big kid.
Mm-hmm. But then you learn, no, you're not. You're not helping.
You learn, why try when there's cake?
Yes, why try when there's cake? Why try to help with things when you could just instead watch a whole lot of movies and develop opinions about them to one day discuss with a friend?
I'm not throwing out my back doing podcasting. Not yet, at least.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know. My posture really could improve. These marathon recording sessions, I hunch too much. I mean, also, again, just in terms of how I feel very represented by Hansel, at one point he is playing with the chess set at the witch's house, and he is so delighted to show Gretel that the queen figure is naked. Oh, man. If you don't like Hansel in this movie, you can come fight us. Find us. We will throw hands at any time to defend Hansel's honor.
Oh, yeah, agreed. I would say that about everybody in this film. They are all, like... I think there's an undue, like, pressure on Sophia Lillis's shoulders because this is her first leading role outside of It, you know, on her own.
Yeah.
But because it's not set in, like, authentic fairy tale or medieval times here, that it is a fairy tale, I think it has much more pliability in terms of, like, she doesn't have to do a middle-aged English accent to sell this thing. Like, she's just performing it like Sophia Lillis, just kind of a little stilted by design of, you know, the style that Oz Perkins wanted to go for.
I really appreciate a fantasy movie that doesn't feel obliged to give everybody a British accent. Yeah, I love, you know, we can imagine a world with witches and potions and magic. We can imagine a world where England doesn't exist. Like, so few movies are brave enough to try that.
Do we talk, because we can return to Sophia Lillis a little bit, and I've got more to talk kind of about the universe and whatnot in this, but let's pivot and talk a little bit about Alice Krige.
Yes, let's do that. Yes. I'm sorry. My understanding of how to pronounce her name changes as often as the accents do in this film.
Alice Krige, she is a legendary, almost feel, I don't know, it's a little trite to use, but like she's infamous, obviously, as the Borg Queen,
of course,
from First Contact and you know, Next Generation.
Yeah.
And an appearance on Picard, apparently, which I haven't seen yet. But,
oh, interesting. Good for her.
How about that?
Did you hear about this?
Yeah, she's done a few things. She has been around for a long, long time and has developed a reputation for these really in-depth and offbeat characters and roles. Mm-hmm. You know, providing a sort of, like, you can imagine someone playing the Borg Queen and you're just like, okay, so you're the queen of a technology race, and you know, someone just coming in there like
beep
start
boop,
crashing it
10010.
Yeah, but she gives this weird psychological development to this character and makes her iconic because she treats her with a certain amount of dignity and respect, and like, let's actually make this a character. This might be what I'm getting cast as. Yeah, that sounded a little, derogatory toward that. I didn't mean that way, but like, if this is what I'm going to play, let's play it full tilt. Let's make it as cool as can be.
Yes, exactly. And I feel like, you know, she brings that sort of rounded performance to the witch in this movie, to the point that, like, you know, the witch, and this is also, I mean, certainly her performance is very good, but this is also the intent of the movie, and Oz Perkins has talked about this. The witch isn't, strictly speaking, evil. Like, the witch is the good guy of the witch's story, and the witch's actions kind of make sense in the context of the world of the movie.
You heard it here first. Trimcap says, eat children.
I say, if you were in a fucked up fantasy environment in which eating children is the only way to get by as a single woman in the world, consider it at least. Don't close your mind off to it. In our world, in the world that you're listening to this, I absolutely do not condone eating children. In fact, I think that if you eat children, you're kind of a dick.
Why am I thinking of a bald person? So what I really there's a lot to talk about with that, to unpack there, but
yeah,
to focus specifically on her performance, that kind of take on this character in the story, the way of telling the story, allows for a much more interesting, like, you can imagine this just being a kind of Wicked Witch of the West sort of scenario. Like,
oh yeah,
she comes in, she looks evil as shit,
yeah,
but like the second you start watching her, she's so kind of like, she pulls you in. She kind of, it's hypnotic. She's charismatic to a degree. She says these like little turns of phrases that are like, oh, I wouldn't expect an evil witch to say that, like this little, I'm trying to think of a good one. Like, the only thing that's coming to mind is when Gretel is washing the table with a washcloth at one point, and it slops to the ground. It like too heavy and it falls to the ground. She says something like
that one's had a little too much to drink.
Yeah, something like that. It's like, oh, you found one that's a little too full up, huh?
Yeah.
Go into the cupboard and get another one. And she picks the thing back up off the ground, and it's dry again. But there's these like little kind of almost pithy turns of phrases that the witch uses that you're like, if you're evil, you're really good at luring me in.
Yeah. I think that there is such a temptation as an actor to get a role as the bad guy, as an evil character, and to just fully, ham that shit up, which is plenty fun to watch in a lot of cases. But I think here,
see The Shining.
Yeah. Yeah, and Jack Nicholson, famous for his very subtle and subdued and understated performances throughout his career. But I think that here she does this very kind of layered and nuanced version of a child-eating witch. And I mean, again, in a movie where they're spending half the movie chilling in this lady's house, it doesn't work if she's, baby munching from the jump and really being over the top about it. I mean, this allows for the kind of the slower burn that the movie is going for.
Baby Munchin' from the Jump is the first track off your ska album.
Wow, you really, the deepest cut of all was that you nailed it as ska right off the bat. Oh, man. Oof.
I know a trumpeter when I talk to one.
Yeah, I know. I gotta sit down and eat some cake to get my strength back up. Well, so the witch and Gretel, won't you?
Yeah.
I mean, their relationship. Do we want to crack this open? This female friendship that unspools between them.
I do, but this is going to sound counterintuitive. To get there, I want to talk about the witch and Hansel.
Oh, okay.
Because I think it plays deeply into the relationship with Gretel.
Mm-hmm.
The witch's behavior around, like, subtle behavior around Hansel is so just skin-crawlingly unsettling to me.
She smells his hair very early on.
She's always just touching his head and like rubbing his hair, and like you could tell it's a very predatory sort of way of, like, if you saw this at a family reunion or like some sort of gathering somewhere of an adult doing that to a kid, you'd be like, I need to tell someone something.
Yeah, we got to get extra eyes on this situation. Yeah.
Yeah. And she's just kind of like always like 2 seconds away from smelling him. Like, you could tell she's just kind of always taking in his scent and testing to see how ripe he's getting, which is part of the original story.
She spoiler alert, she wants to eat him. She's gonna eat this kid, cook him and eat him. That's her whole deal.
That wasn't clear yet.
Yeah. The voiceover didn't explain specifically what was happening. Audiences might have been thrown by these twists.
So, but like when she's teaching him, the other thing I really like about and how it plays into Gretel's story is like the witch is putting the wedge between them by giving them and teaching them each separate things that are going to put them on different paths.
Yes.
So when Hansel early on says that he can chop wood and they say he can learn, the witch sets him on the path to, like, this is how you sharpen an axe. Mm-hmm. And, you know, soon we'll have you on the rest of the things in the shed, kind of letting him in on the, like, oh, there's secret things that I can, you know, follow, like, that are going to lead him to his ultimate demise here. Well, he ultimate fate, which isn't a demise, but we'll get there.
Sure.
But then, you know, he starts going out into the woods by himself and starting to chop wood and, you know, discovering all these weird things like shoes in the trees and toys in the rocks and stuff.
There's all these different scenes of him trying to chop down trees and just not having any luck. Like, he's just, his little noodly arms can't get that axe through the wood. But then there's finally a scene where he's been chopping away at, like, a smaller, thinner tree, kind of a sapling, and it seems like it isn't working, but then he just gives it a shove and the tree, like, falls over. Like, he's put a big enough dent in it that this snaps it and knocks it over.
I love this little detail, though, because, like, he starts just like a child would. I've seen men cut down trees, and so he swings this spindly little axe at this massive tree, thinking he's going to chop it down. Mm-hmm. But as he's entering the world and learning how to be, you know, like, functional, he's like, okay, I, as one tiny little child, am not going to have any effect on this massive-ass tree. And he moves to a more moderate tree that he can chop down. And, like, that's a slow example of him slowly learning, you know, and going down that path that's going to take him away from Gretel.
When he stops chopping and elbows the tree and it actually falls over, that's my nomination for the Oscars stand up and cheer moment. That's my Flash entering the Speed Force. I was so... like, the greatest moment of catharsis, I think, in the entire movie, greater than the witch dying, is just Hansel successfully chopping down a tree. It's like, good for you, little guy. I'm happy for you.
So yeah, so with that kind of in mind, that the witch is separating them in these ways, let's talk a little bit about her and Gretel.
Yeah. So she senses in Gretel that Gretel has this kind of clairvoyance, you know, this ability to, like,
can we talk about the black fingers?
Oh, yeah. Which you kind of don't notice at first, or they're cleverly kept off camera, but then as, you know, as she and the witch are kind of talking more, we finally see the witch's fingers, and they're kind of black from the tips down to, like, the knuckle or something.
Yeah. And the witch's character design is just so magnificent to me. She's got these, like, roomy eyes, like rheumatism eyes, you know, and which is a part of the book as well. She was not able to see and relied on her scent. It's simultaneously functional, but also brings in all of the cliches of a witch with the pointy hat and the black and the kind of trope, the you know, stereotype that they're all, you know, ugly. Mm-hmm. Or, you know, there's reason that they have been othered and put on the outskirts of life. You know, we find through actual witch stories that it's just like, yeah, because living out in the fucking woods does a number on your stress and, like, nutrition and, like, of course, what do you think someone's gonna look like living out there?
There's a reason most people don't live in the woods.
Yeah. But, you know, they incorporate that into it, and she uses all of this to kind of become bird of prey. You know, like, she weaves that a little bit into her performance. She's always kind of, like, has her talons going, and, you know, her mouth is almost beakish, the way that she kind of holds her words, you know, and how they come out and how she moves her head to look at people.
What I also sort of like about the character design and also the production design around the witch is that she's always kind of making potions, like, how much that is just business that she has to do. She's grinding herbs, she's mixing things. She has this Vaseline type goop that she has Gretel start rubbing on her hands when she's teaching her how to get, you know, a stick to jump up. It's basically how she gets the broom to work. It's a broom-looking stick that it gives her wood kinesis.
One might call it a broomstick.
Oh, okay. And then are there bed knobs in the house as well, or have I got this mixed up with a different film?
Different witch.
But but just the way that there is, that she's always kind of got something mysterious and tactile that she's doing, and some kind of potion that she's creating. And it's never a witch stirring a cauldron in the stereotypical way. It's very much like she's harvesting bits and pieces and ingredients and throwing them into a thing and mixing them, and never explaining what she's doing.
Yeah, there was one moment in both watches, I kind of didn't catch what it was, but there's a moment later in the film when she knows Gretel is about to do something of action. And she knows Gretel has kind of discovered the underground space of the house and the oven, if you will, where she kind of, Gretel says, I have to outsmart her. But then the witch kind of, I think, knows that's what's going on and throws a curveball at her. Anyway, she says that she has to leave for a second, and she has this like comically large shovel that she brings with her.
Yeah.
But she says something, and when she calls, I try not to, I try not to ignore it. What was that? Who did she say is calling?
Well,
and what is she doing?
Well, she was saying that nature is calling, and so I don't know if the implication was that she was going to go outside and use the bathroom and bury it or something like that.
Okay, that gives a whole different set of questions I have about the size of that shovel.
I know. I mean, that's exact. But also, you look at how many children she's been eating, and I don't know. I don't want to go down this road too much further. But I think that so
maybe
look,
hair constipates you. That much hair you're eating, you're consuming that many piggy tails. It's gonna piggy up your tail.
Oh God, Landon, why can't you just be a normal boy? I do
She's
have
naked.
There's such a. I have one of my big issues is hair in my mouth. I can't stand it. I hate it.
Yeah.
It's very viscerally disgusting. And so that there is a scene where she, picks up a piece of what looks to be normal food off the table, eats it, and then proceeds to pull one long strand of hair that turns into an entire braid out of her mouth, which she lays down on the table in front of Gretel. Is just. But I was looking away from the screen, but I had not taken out my headphones, and boy, the sound design. Oh.
I really like that moment because yes, it's one of the few like gross out, like typical horror convention things in this movie. But what is going on in that moment is like her telling Gretel, yeah, it's all fucking real. Like, you think you've been dreaming. I'm here to tell you, like, yes, you caught my secret. I eat fucking kids. And I have Hansel, and this is how the rest of this is gonna go.
It is really a like, I mean that. Think of that as a negotiation tactic. If you're like trying to sign a new lease or something, or get a car or something, and you just like pull a braid out of your mouth in front of the salesman and slam it down on the table without blinking, daring them to bring it up.
I was trying to make a closing is for winners analogy there, and I couldn't.
You mean hair is for closers?
Hair is. There's something in there. I don't know. It's an IKEA joke.
Yeah, Glenn.
People write in. Give me your best versions of it.
Glenn Gretel, I think. I don't 100% get the kids being released at the end of the movie. I don't know if that's us jumping too far ahead from witch discussion, but let's go there.
No, it's fair. We can go there.
Come the end of the movie, Gretel is able to use wood kinesis to clobber the witch and get her, knock her into her own oven, and she dies, and her hold over Hansel is broken, and Hansel goes free. But once the witch dies, then all of these children who have been lured into the woods sort of suddenly come out of the trees and go wandering away back off towards town, implying, I guess, that the children hadn't been killed and eaten the whole time, even though we see earlier a very visceral scene of the witch dumping a bunch of goopy children parts onto a table and transforming them into food.
Yeah, it's a little eye-rolly to me. One of the few moments in this film that are where, like, I almost, since it being a fairy tale world, could buy that. The fucking crews coming back from the end of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Like, I can deal with that. What's eye-rolly about it is it's this kind of interesting image of all the kids emerging from the woods and kind of flowing by Gretel in this moment of redemption and release. And then, like, it cuts to a wider shot of them walking away, and then, like, Field of Dreams, they just kind of fade. Like, they weren't really there. It just kind of, like, a really kind of trite way of showing their souls have been released from this dark place.
Oh, I see. They weren't literal children. They were spirit children.
They were spirit children.
Mistake.
Yeah, they don't taste as good.
Yeah.
They taste like LaCroix children.
Yeah, but I mean, it's so much better for your cholesterol. I you know, some people are allergic to real children, and you got to use the imitation kind.
But while we're at that last moment, I was kind of confused by it when I saw it in the theater and when I saw it the first time watching this. But after really paying attention to, like, the subtext of this movie, this final moment with Gretel was really I don't know, kind of poignant in a way. So she defeats the witch, she comes into her own powers in doing so, like she is now, like, she fully witch powered herself. And the whole kind of, like, internal monologue through the VO of this last part is her talking about, like, making her own decisions and, like, we're not bound by fate and all this shit. And in that final moment, the kids walk by her and she's reflecting on all of that, saying, I can write the end of my own story. Hansel goes off to, you know, his destiny, and she's like, I can stay here at this house and, you know, build something better on top of the darkness that was here, or not. I could go do what I want to. Yeah. And that's what's being said. But what's being shown to us is her fingers turning black like the witches. Yeah. And the look on her face is not one of someone claiming their independence and freedom. It's, oh no, what's happening? Yeah. Like, there's a juxtaposition between what's being said and what's being shown. And I found that to be kind of like, oh, interesting. So we might not be able to believe the stories we tell ourselves.
Yeah. No, I mean, I do. That is one good use of the voiceover, I think, is having her saying a bunch of stuff that is very much contradicted by what we're seeing play out on screen. And, like, yeah, this notion of lies we tell ourselves, narratives that we create,
which pairs very well with another point in this film. I actually wrote the dialogue of this. It's kind of earlier on, I think, where it's either where they're just leaving their childhood home, or it's right around the hunter, maybe. But she says she's fascinated by this fairy tale of the girl in the pink hat, right? Yeah. And she's like, she's wondering in this VO what one has to do to have a tale written about them.
Yes.
And as she's pondering that, then she literally says, and I wonder if I would want that. Like, do I want a tale written about me? Yeah. And it's almost like saying, by the characters in these fairy tales are inextricably linked to the fate of the fairy tale, and that she is now part of a fairy tale in this final moment. She is part of a fairy tale that she can't escape from, and thus, even though her mind is telling her she has options, the tale itself is telling us, no, she is now part of this story that will never change.
And the tale of the girl in the pink hat, I mean, the whole purpose of that tale is that it's the moral of, like, don't take gifts from people. You can't trust shit. Like, the fairy tale is a cautionary tale about, look at the awful thing that happened to this person. And Gretel realizing at the end that, like, oh shit, I'm the cautionary tale. Oh, I am going to be a fairy tale, and it's bad to be the protagonist of a fairy tale because awful stuff happens to you.
But it's even, there's like a more existential layer to it too that I know also exists in Longlegs, where it's like, it's never made explicit that this is a gift given to her by the witch, and that's something she should have been cautious of. Or are you just born into something with a gift and you have no choice in being skeptical of it? You're just kind of like, you're stuck with that line of life.
Yeah. And part of why I realize I said some kind of I realize I've taken a pretty cool tone towards the witch and a pretty optimistic tone on the witch, and I want to clarify why I'm saying that, because the witch seems to recognize in Gretel that she has this. Like, if we take the read on it that this is something she was born with, having these kind of magical abilities to her, the witch sees this in her, recognizes this potential, and a lot of their interactions are the witch trying to kind of educate her and teach her how to harness her power, how to use her power, and how she can, take hold of this to make her own way in a very brutal and unforgiving world. And part of the whole thing with fattening up Hansel to eat him, the witch is kind of explaining to her, this is how you unlock your powers and go all the way. You need to sacrifice that thing that is most important to you. You need to you need to eat your brother in order to get this. You need to lose your brother, and this is how you do it. And again,
literally and metaphorically.
Yes. And so that her the witch is not evil. The witch is just like, hey, I know that you're like me, and the only way I've been able to make any kind of life for myself amid all of these other terrible options in this brutal, awful world, is by seizing on this stuff. And it's unpleasant, but that's how you get by. I mean, it is like, there's an angle of mentorship to it, really.
Yeah, which is very much, I think that is calling to like real world, like, for lack of a better term, coven stuff. Where there would be meetings of people in the woods and stuff. It wouldn't be, ritualistic sacrifice, the way that Cotton Mather's maybe wanted us to believe it was, but it was a sort of, sisterhood in a time when, these people had no one else.
It was just it was just women hanging out, and men had to make it a weird thing. We had to get all strange about it and make it scary and spooky.
I'm so glad we left that in the past.
Fixed, 100% fixed. Thematically, as long as we're like in the realm of themes, which I believe is the third movie in the Nutcracker franchise, Battle of the Realm of Themes. So this movie has a lot in common with Longlegs. I mean, it does. The way that it looks, like, visually, very, very similar composition. The fact that it's about a haunted female protagonist with second sight. There's
which is also a little bit of Blackcoat's daughter. And the pretty little thing that lived in the house.
Okay, so Oz Perkins.
I think I add pretty in there, and it's not. I don't think that's part of the title.
When you give your movie a title that is like 26 words long, you can't get mad at people if they add one or two in there. I mean, brevity is important. Something you learned with Longlegs. That there's just also themes that kind of come back. I mean, in Gretel and Hansel, so much of this is that in order to become more powerful, in order to really kind of grow into herself, Gretel has to get rid of Hansel. Like, the witch directly tells her, your brother is holding you back. And, Longlegs is a movie about a malevolent force that causes men to murder their entire families. And it's two movies in a row that kind of have this notion of familial obligations as something that is holding you back, and it's a burden to be shed. And I'm not trying to suggest that Oz Perkins thinks that you should kill your family. I'm just thinking that it's interesting to see that across movies, this notion of people kind of like, are the people that we love, are they a burden? Like, how do we manage these ties to family, and what do we sacrifice in order to hold on to these things?
Yeah, I think this is interesting in being told through the sibling lens. Compared to the familial lens of the family unit lens. Although you could even extrapolate that further and just talk about all of his films kind of being about the kind of violent nature or fractured nature of families, which worth mentioning, I think, to a small degree. Oz Perkins being the son of Anthony Perkins, and that being an interesting, way of growing up. The kind of scandalized nature of Anthony Perkins' career and personal life.
Yeah, which for those of you who don't know, Anthony Perkins was gay, but was not really able to be open about that, and so that's that's not great.
And having your father be Norman Bates.
Yeah.
I mean, that's got to be like growing up. Sorry, Oz Perkins, for psychoanalyzing you, but like
when you make fucked
growing
up
up,
horror movies for a living, you kind of expect guys on podcasts to psychoanalyze you.
It's got maybe this is very unfair of me to draw these correlations because I'm not fucking a therapist, or I'm not a therapist and I'm not fucking a therapist. So,
but good to clarify both of those things.
Yes. The growing up with your father being one of the most feared men in modern pop culture, like that's gotta do something. Like I watch all these wrestling documentaries, and they're all
the
these,
wrestling documentaries keep coming up. It's
I know.
and
Well,
wrestling
I watch
documentaries.
That's what that sums up my taste range. But
that's my pro wrestling persona is one of the two guys from Jerry.
That's our tag team. Wrestling documentaries. There's a lot of interviews with children in there, especially of like the heels of wrestling, and they're like. The difference between, like, I just knew him as my dad, and then when we went out in town or I saw him on TV and all these people are booing him or he's playing this character, like, it does a weird psychological thing to a kid. And so it's very interesting that all of this kind of question over can you trust family members while also bringing into the mix protection of family members and it's very interesting.
Are you born with an evil inside you or something that people find repellent? Yeah. There's a lot of there's a lot of stuff being mined and worked through in very, very beautiful and unsettling films.
Indeed. I want to talk a little bit about the underlying, like, I don't know how to describe it exactly, so I'll just give you the example that I want to talk about. And it starts with the tale at the beginning of the tale of the girl in the pink hat.
The puppy dog tale? Or just a regular tale?
The Tale. But there's got to be some sort of property called Puppy Tales, and it's Tales, isn't it? Well, there's DuckTales.
Well, and there's Puppy Dog Pals. So
this pal isn't a play on tail.
One of my friends wrote for Puppy Dog Pals. I have to plug it whenever I can. Parents who listen to our podcast, don't show your kids Paw Patrol. Show them Puppy Dog Pals so my friend can get residuals.
The tale of the girl in the pink hat. We get, just like the Mexican, we get this tale twice through two different perspectives.
True. New perspectives.
But what I find fascinating about this is, like, the idea of magic in this movie in this story is like the girl in the pink hat is Gretel's favorite fairy tale. Yeah. And she knows it even though she's never really heard it told to her. And that's kind of like point of conversation at some point of like, how do we know about these tales? We just kind of, they become fully formed in our consciousness somehow. And so she knows this story. She always tells it to Hansel. And the telling of it is interesting because you're following this narration telling this girl was the most beautiful girl ever, but there's this dark inside to her. She had a power that could, people try to tap into for foresight, but she had another power of influence. Yeah. Which also I think is interesting in terms of what the witch does, in this movie to Gretel and to Hansel. Yeah. But they as you mentioned before, take her up to this kind of healer in black that is sitting on top of this hill beneath a triangular A-frame.
Big, beautiful, just creepy fucking triangle. So good.
It is. And so, okay, a couple things are happening in that moment where it's like, as we learn later, the girl in the pink hat was the daughter of the witch of this movie.
Yes.
So that witch was a witch before she had the daughter, and she's kind of like, she recognizes her daughter also has the powers.
Or did she become a witch because her daughter got witched up by the healer who she took her to? Because the girl in the pink hat was fine. She was normal, but she was sick. They took her to the healer, and then she got healed, but then that gave her witch powers, which led her to start influencing people to kill themselves. And then...
Interesting. Yeah, because the narration says something like, you can't give without taking something away, and you see this witch doctor like holding the girl and like pulling this like inky, smoky substance out of her, which you presume is the
sickness,
sickness in her.
Yeah.
But what is it being replaced with? This power.
Darkness is the gift that's been given to her, really, just like the song "The Sickness." It's right there in black and white, Landon. You got to just look at it, and there it is.
Ooh, for sure. What I find fascinating about this, is that the magic, whether she the witch becomes a witch after her daughter does all this stuff or not, it's kind of irrelevant to my point here, which is I really appreciate and find it fascinating that like this movie doesn't start with like I'm the witch, the magic in this world originates with me, like I won't give up the source of my powers. It's like there's always like there was this big witch on the hill under this triangle long before this girl existed. Yeah. Where did she come from? Yeah. Where did her power? It just kind of like brings forth this kind of idea of ancient, before human civilization, these powers that can be harnessed, and like where it's almost Lovecraftian in a weird way of cosmic powers existing and mankind just kind of being, it's a trivial thing in the kind of story of magic.
Yeah, we don't really understand it, and the people who we can sometimes try to harness it for our own benefit, like the people in the town when they find the girl has the ability to tell the future, they try to go to her for predictions, and instead she just winds up influencing them to kill themselves. Like it's we can try to play with these powers, but we don't understand them, and it will never work out well for us.
And this film is after Hereditary, it's after Midsummer, and continues the trend of triangle symbolism is what I was going to say.
Yeah,
symbolism, which I really like in this movie. I mean, obviously it's a striking image, as you've already illustrated, but what I like about it is like triangles and right angles, like those are the most unnatural things to nature. You're not going to find a perfect triangle in nature.
No.
And having these perfect triangles in nature just creates this like something's not right here. Like this shouldn't be. But your brain is so used to both that you don't clock it right away.
Dude, if that's how you feel about triangles, one piece of advice: do not go to Egypt. You are going to see some things there that will make you massively upset.
But that's what I mean. Like those are made by man.
Yeah, like, no, I agree. But if you just think it's unsettling, I mean, get ready for some of the biggest triangles on Earth.
It's fine. If I get scared, I'll just go around to the other side of it.
Okay, fair. Yeah, it won't replicate that on all sides. It is kind of the triangle is a unnatural shape, but literally one of the first like constructions made by human beings was triangles. It was like we don't see this out and about in nature, so let's at great personal expense make some triangles that we can look at.
Well, and I mean, I don't know. This is where you can get real, film schooly, pretentious, eye-rolly stuff about it. But like,
we may have already.
I find
there.
it interesting that triangles are also one of the strongest shapes in nature. Like, if you look at shelving and stuff, like the strongest way you can support something is a triangular, foundation.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's like talking about the strength of magic, like if that's being part of that symbol. I don't know.
Yeah, you could really go full QAnon on this movie. I mean, there's enough symbolism and stuff in there, and there's so little that is actively spelled out.
The last fucking horror movie we talked about was Poltergeist. Give me a break.
No,
we need to go a little hardcore on this.
No. The last horror movie we talked about was Vampire in Brooklyn, and there's a lot of symbolism you can go really hard on there. Blood leaking out of a keyhole.
Eddie Murphy naked.
Doing a dick check for the dropsies. All kinds of stuff.
Oh God. What else? Is there anything else that we haven't covered? Like big sequences. you want to talk about here? You know what? Here, let's talk about this. We didn't talk much about the underground, the oven, the dark space which always exists in horror films. What is the uncanny, unseen space?
It's sort of a big white tiled room with a single drain pipe leading into it, and there's like a table or a slab. There's a big slab in there with
depends
bodies
on
it.
The scene. It changes.
Yeah, different shit shows up because it's all spooky and weird.
Sometimes it's dream sequences. Maybe it's not dream sequences. We're never really sure until the end when it's totally not a dream sequence.
I think also sort of a problem that I had that I think contributed to my feelings about pacing and stuff as the movie goes on is that a lot of the big revelations come in dream sequences, so then both us and Gretel can't really tell whether it actually happened or not, which just on some level it makes it hard for me to like know the stakes or know if or know how what we just saw is going to contribute to the rest of the movie going on. So that might have also been part of my problem with it. I don't know.
I have a soft spot for dream sequences. There's some of the few things that like not much unsettles me about movies, but a well-executed surreal dream can really tap into like my psyche in a way that most things can't.
This is just this was a moment in me kind of figuring out who you were, where I mentioned that whenever my parents and I would watch an old musical together, my dad would always fast forward through the dream ballet sequence, and you threw up your hands and said, "Those are my favorite parts of musicals." And I just...
Well, as far as musicals go, it depends. But yeah, like the ending sequence of Singing in the Rain with Sid Charisse, it's beautiful.
Yeah,
one of my top 5 favorite films all time is The Red Shoes, and the centerpiece of that movie is this ballet sequence that is just surreal, and it's not really a dream sequence, but it's played like dream logic. It's just the most beautiful thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, and I mean, I can't really speak to the dream ballet from Singing in the Rain, because when I watched it with my parents, it went by very quickly with my dad saying, more of this shit.
Gotta sing.
If you've learned anything about my father from listening to this podcast, is that he hates dream ballet sequences, and he hates when hard drives are opened on beaches. Those are his 2 red lines. Otherwise, very open and welcoming man, but he will not.
I have bad news to tell him about the new musical I'm opening. There's a whole there's a whole act dedicated to software developers getting ideas and tinkering with hard drives on the white sandy shores of Kauai.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of dancers who are dressed up like hard drives, and they're cavorting on a very sandy beach back and forth. But it's all very symbolic of something. Okay, I'm sorry. I think I distracted from the main point, which is that there's a spooky fucking spot underneath this witch's house where she's turning child parts into feasts.
Yeah. Well, it's obviously it's integral to the story being like this is the oven from the original story. This is their adaptation, their imagining of it. Let me start with a question. Just like dream sequence or not, how does this rendition of the idea of the oven work for you?
I mean, I think that aesthetically it fits with the movie. I mean, it's a weird open liminal space, and also if the magical witch's oven looked a lot like a normal regular oven, it would kind of be a letdown. I mean, the fact that her oven is basically like a fire pit full of huge blue flames with a cage above it designed for child roasting.
At the same time, though, I could still see Guy Ritchie grilling up some steaks on that thing.
Oh my God, yeah, he's talking to the documentary crew about that. Guy, if you told me that Guy Ritchie made a Hansel and Gretel movie, A, I would totally believe it because he also made an Aladdin movie, and B, I would probably be more inclined to remember that than Operation Fortune.
So we talked a little bit about like the influence of Kubrick on a few of these scenes and tones. I think this, and this is just me speculating, I don't know what Oz Perkins' influences are here, or the cinematographers or the production designers. But
I feel like if you're an artsy director or cinematographer, you probably have a fairly rosy view of Stanley Kubrick. I'm just going to guess.
Well, I think that this underground space here of this oven and the liminal nature, as you said, puts me in mind more of David Lynch. There are, it enters this kind of surreal space, this like, is it reality? Is it not reality? Weird things that aren't of nature can kind of happen there. It very much feels like the Black Lodge or the Red Room.
Yes. I think that it's a little bit
There's a giant curtain in it at one point.
There is a giant inexplicable curtain. And I think that just it as this being a bizarre space, it's a little undercut by the fact that everything in this movie is really bizarre and unsettling looking. Like the real world is like on Twin Peaks, the Red Room or the Black Lodge, like that looks notably different from the rest of the town. Whereas here it's like, well, all this movie has been showing me is fucked up weird spaces. So I guess it doesn't stand out to me as much as other shit in the movie.
But this is very much a space separated on its own. I mean, there is a little bit of an idea of how you enter the space from that like weird tiny door that's behind the cracked wall in the cupboard, right? But like you never see anyone enter this room. Anytime we're here, the scene starts with someone waking up in this room.
Oh,
and
we see the witch enter the room, and it's real cool.
We do?
Yeah, she pours out of the drain pipe like the gutter spout as a black liquid.
We, the audience, are always just in the room. We don't walk with, like in 54, we're going down those stairs to see the underground room where people are hanging out. We are never introduced to how to get to this room. We are always just kind of put into the room.
Well, doesn't she find the door behind the wall and opens that?
She does, but we never open the door. She never goes through the door. We never follow her through the door. We always appear in this room with her. And, like, it might be maybe too small of a difference to, like, really pick out. But to me, that is separating the space. It's like, this is where the real stuff happens. This is where the illusions are gone. This is where, the uncanny affects the real world up there. It's another place. And this is a very common theme to horror films. Like there is the dark place, the thing where things happen.
Yeah.
Pulse is a good example of that, where, these spaces where the ghosts can emerge into this world, these kind of dark, dingy spaces. I mean, it's so ubiquitous I can't even begin to pull all of the examples. It's almost every single horror film.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I guess that didn't. I'll buy that. I don't watch as many horror movies as you do, so I didn't. I guess I didn't plug it into its greater context, and I didn't. I guess I never thought about the fact that we never follow anyone walking into this space, but also like I feel like so many of the. Like, so much spatially of the witch's entire house is kind of that way, where it never, again, it doesn't fully make sense, the size of the house or the layout of the house inside compared to how small it is on the outside.
True.
I just figured it was part and parcel of the fucked up house.
But you don't go from the kitchen to the bedroom and you go, whoa, where are we all of a sudden? Like, your brain goes, oh, they went to bed and they're in the bedroom that's off the kitchen. Like, the basement, this oven is very much, and it's like the belly of the house too, the belly of the beast. There's all this kind of weird, packaging that comes along with that.
Yeah.
Anyway, I found it to be, some of it is really cool. I like just the general gist of all of that. The drain pipe and the witch emerging, like on some watches I'm like, okay, that's cool. On some other watches I'm like, well, you didn't have much budget or a lot of people working with you. Like, you had to do what you had to do. And
I'm really impressed at the $5 million figure. I mean, to make a movie that looks this distinctive with this many costumes, and I mean, I know that it's limited in the number of locations, but they're like heavily dressed and set up and orchestrated locations. I mean, I just don't know how you do that for $5 million in this economy or in that economy. Because it costs so much money just to have a person walk into a room in a movie and have it look good. And this whole damn thing on $5 million, these sets,
Yeah,
it's really a feat.
yeah, indeed. All right. Well, is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you want to touch on?
Only one other thing that I want to touch on, although I actually wouldn't want to touch on it in real life because I think it would feel weird. The witch has a hairless cat.
Cold hot dog.
No, no. Although a hairless cat probably feels a lot like a wet, cold hot dog. The witch has a hairless cat that's always just kind of wandering around. It's really creepy and weird. If you own a hairless cat, I mean no disrespect. If you own a hairless dog, I actually want to know your dog. But
what I really appreciate about that is, like, so many times it's the black cat, right? And I think on one level, like, that would just be kind of eye-rolly. But on another, like, I don't know if this isn't his intention, but, like, black cats are the least adopted because they have these evil connotations for reasons like that. So I appreciated him not using a black cat there.
I think hairless cats are probably not very frequently adopted because of obvious reasons. Looking at them,
I don't know. There's a whole market for them,
and I'm not.
But you're
I'm
right.
not shaming anyone, but you can't argue that they look really unsettling.
But I think to the average person, you're right. It's like you can't see one and immediately get some sort of like mental picture of what it would feel like to touch that thing, whether that's real or not. Like when you're a kid and you're thinking, oh god, there's a snake, it's going to be slimy and like all that, and it's not anything like you think it is, but your brain makes you think there is. I look, there's the Mexican hairless dog, the Zolo, and I am a fan of them. I think they're really cute, and I saw one at a restaurant once and went over and asked to pet it, and the second I touched the dog I was like, oh, interesting. Okay, I suddenly like I respect you, and I think you're a very cute dog, but I don't know that the upfront tactile experience is as rewarding as I'd hoped. All right. Well, should we wrap this up and talk about some of the stuff next week?
Yes. Let's absolutely leave all the best bits.
Why do you think this film was forgotten? Interesting. I'm very interested in your perspective for someone who didn't know this existed.
Yeah. I mean, this is a good movie, for one thing. I think this movie is good. I don't like it as much as other movies that I've seen or other movies we've done for this podcast, but this is certainly one of the best movies we've done. I think that it was forgotten because for all of the great things about it, it doesn't really do anything super new. It brings a new vibe and perspective to this story, and in a lot of very distinctive and impactful ways, but it's not like this take on the movie is not something that, like, word of mouth you can go to your friends and be like, oh man, it's Hansel and Gretel except this.
Right.
So it's not super surprising in any way, and it's also just it's creepy, but it's not scary. It's not like a fucked up scary horror movie. It's not like Terrifier or something that's going to live on. I want nothing to do with those films. But so it's just it was a wide release horror movie that wasn't.
You want to know why I live on the outside of the horror community? It's not by choice. I got kicked out of there because I didn't like Terrifier.
Yeah. They ran you out of town on a rail because you didn't like watching a clown torture people.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, something I've never done to you. But so it's a movie that is not super surprising and it's not super scary, and it's just in a horror movie environment where there's a lot of horror movies out there that are going to catch fire for different reasons. I think often with a wide audience, the reason they catch fire is because they do something especially shocking or gratuitous. So this movie just kind of gets lost in the mix. And also, I think something else happened in the early months of 2020 that also may have affected people's capacity to remember quirky little indie films that came out. But,
maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe just a little bit. Yeah.
Who can truly say? What about you? Why do you think it was forgotten?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I got lost on the question of why it was forgotten. So I want to I'm going to take a little bit of what you just said and apply it to my verdict in a second. But as far as specifically why it was forgotten, yeah, I think generally you foreshadowed this at the very beginning of the episode. this was an explosion of fairy tale time. Dark fairy tales
Yeah.
were just making a huge emergence in like the popularity of The Witcher, and Game of Thrones being out there. But even the movies was like Gretel and Hansel, Witch Hunters, the slew of Pinocchios we've seen, the
Make it
Tarzan
stop.
we covered.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
King Arthur. There's like 3 or 4 Peter Pan movies.
Would
Red
you-
Riding Hood.
Would you call Tarzan a fairy tale?
Sure. Yeah.
I guess it's a fairy tale for
I don't know,
racists.
maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Well, that doesn't disqualify it from being a fairy tale.
No, that's true.
Sorry
I'm
to tell you.
Yeah, I know. We can't take it to fairy tale court and get it removed.
So, like, and I think if we've proven anything, that unless it's like Disney or Shrek, people don't give a shit about fairy tales. It appears like they're not going to be much of a financial or popular success, even if they are critically acclaimed, like this film.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the bigger reason why Oz Perkins didn't pop into Longlegs is Gretel and Hansel doesn't have Nick Cage in it.
True, it doesn't. And like again, Longlegs is a legitimately scary movie with like fucked up stuff in it that can kind of catch. Well, and also the marketing campaign did a really good job of like selling it on. Nicolas Cage looks so fucked up in this movie. Micah Monroe almost died looking at him.
But you know what I mean by that is like there's not a kind of gimmick to this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you put like I don't know, Meryl Streep doing her Into the Woods witch type of performance as this witch, it might be remembered more, but not. It would definitely be to the detriment of the movie. Like, do you want to be a remembered bad film, or do you want to be a good forgotten film?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, and this kind of falls in the latter.
Yeah.
So, I've since we saw the machine was going to do this, I've just been eager to hear your verdict on this. Should we send this back to modern memory or leave it forgotten?
I think we should remember it. Let's remember the shit out of
Fuck
this movie.
yes!
Yeah, no, this movie rules. It's good. Like again, it's got things in it that I don't 100% love, but this movie should absolutely be remembered. If you like me watched Longlegs and had your mind blown, watch this shit. It's good. It's on Tubi. It's free.
Even Bela has chimed in here to say that she loves Gretel and Hansel. Come here, baby.
Yeah, because she loves the hairless cat in it. She's like, oh yeah, that could be me one day.
What do you think? Should we send Gretel and Hansel back to modern memory? Huh? Say something.
What? Just once again squeezing the cat to try and get content.
Just holding her.
Yeah.
Just holding her.
Just trying to cajole this cat into making cat noises.
Okay. She agrees with me. She watched it with me twice.
Wow.
Send this back to modern memory, and for the reasons you said, it was forgotten, like that it doesn't fit neatly into horror, that it doesn't fit, all these things, that it sits kind of separate from that. That's why I want to send this back to modern memory. That's why I appreciate it cutting out its own space in that world.
Yeah.
To go, like, we don't have to be the same as everything else, and there is room to tell these kinds of stories.
Yes. Yeah. That room might be a creepy liminal room that you don't really understand how anybody got into, where a lot of child body parts become food, but it is room, and it created that room for itself.
And in a time when we need extra room for all the people in the world.
Oh yeah, and sometimes we make that room by eating some of them. No, wait, no, that's not the world that I want to go with. No,
not yet.
Not yet. Shh. Well,
all right.
Okay.
I'm excited. This is entering the pantheon of dual send back to modern memory. Let's put it in the transporter and send it. Careening back.
Yes,
I'm curious. I want people to see it.
Keeping good company with the likes of Vampire in Brooklyn and Simone.
And the last song.
Yeah, oh yes, well, of course. Hey, double feature. Gretel and Hansel in the last song. Hansel grows up to become Greg Kinnear.
You might be foreshadowing for something in our mini that I'm going to talk about.
No. Stay tuned.
Until next week, when we continue this conversation, I have been Landon Solano for Truman Caps.
And I've been Truman Caps for Landon Solano. Stay out of the woods, everybody.
Movie Memory Machine is part of the Gruntwork Podcast Network. Join our Patreon at patreon.com/gruntworkpodcast to keep the machine running. Theme song by Porky's Groove Machine. Rate us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. For more information on today's show, visit MovieMemoryMachine.com.